Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Greetings, all you hypothesizers, observers, inferers, and concluders alike. It's time to see, hear, think, and generally get involved with the very things that are shaping the future around us. It's time for your weekly dose of Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. And here he is, with his fingers plunged deep into the virtual modelling clay. It's the man himself, Matthew Dickerson. Welcome to the microphone, Matt.
Well, thank you, James, but I've been had.
Oh!
I'm really frustrated and disappointed that I've been had. I'm a fan of cricket. I like watching my cricket.
Aren't we all?
The T20 World Cup is on at the moment. Fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. It's a plethora of cricket.
Absolutely right. And lots of countries playing. The USA playing. Lots of different countries playing that we don't normally see. Fantastic. So I sat down.
So it's like a real World Cup rather than just a World Cup of a sport that only your country plays.
That only mostly
like a World Cup of
play.
Aussie rules if we had one. Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway.
That's right. Exactly. So I sat down to watch a bit of cricket because I thought the Aussies are playing. I'll have a bit of a look at that. Checked on my app to see what time they're playing, and I went, great, I'll look at that game. And I'm looking through various channels and various pay TV providers, and finally I found the only way was to watch it on Amazon Prime. I had to subscribe to Amazon Prime to watch that. Now, I thought we had rules that were introduced for major sporting events where they were still going to be available on free-to-air, so they're accessible to everyone.
That would seem fair.
It would seem fair. And so if you want to watch the AFL Grand Final, sure, that's still going to be on free-to-air. That's a major event. That's fair enough. I kind of thought the T20 World Cup, including the US of A, would be a major event, but apparently not. And Amazon have bought the worldwide rights, and there are some little anomalies you see. So, for example, State of Origin Rugby League is on free-to-air. On pay TV, on Foxtel, you can't watch the actual game live, so you've got to use the free-to-air. That's the agreement they've got.
Right.
But as soon as the game's finished, Foxtel's got replays of the game, so they've obviously got some deal there. Sure, you get to have the advantage of live, but replays, highlights, all the rest of it, they'll be available on pay TV. But not even that with cricket. Amazon, the deal they've done is obviously exclusive. I assume pretty much worldwide. You can watch the game live, you can watch the highlights, you can watch a replay, but all on Amazon Prime.
You have paid your dues to Amazon.
So I've had to subscribe at least for a short period of time until the World Cup's over.
No. But
what they're hoping for, and they paid, I don't actually know how much, but they paid a lot, I'm assuming. I assume that Amazon hope that you've paid your subscription, you then watch it, then, that's not a bad show, I might watch that. And hopefully I'll be strong enough, James. I'll be strong enough to resist. And at the end of the World Cup, I want to unsubscribe.
I'm just thinking, surely there's a ham radio operator who's commentating the cricket that you could sort of tune in, the old ham radio.
Well, you could probably listen to it as well. There's probably some radio stations out there, but someone might just have some blogs going to tell me the score. But I did want to actually watch it at some stage.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's the world we've come to.
It is the world we've come to. Have they got American commentators?
Well, I assume they've got different commentators for different parts around the world. Certainly when I've watched some of it, I've seen people like Ricky Ponting, former Australian Test cricket captain. So you've got those, but it might be localised around the world. Although you do have different commentators from different countries that I've heard commentating, the ones that I've been listening to. So maybe they do just have an international mix of commentators there, or maybe it's more related to the game. So when I've watched Australia, I've heard Ricky Ponting, but maybe he doesn't commentate on any other game. So don't know. I'll have to ask someone over in America that's watching it. How many people would that be? Not many.
Well, I wonder if they bought the rights. So this is the start of the changes that come in. It slowly metamorphoses into something a bit more like baseball.
Maybe it's something where it will just be whatever you want to watch. It's there, but you've got to pay for it.
Well, we have a bunch of stuff for you to ponder over today. What can expectant parents buy today that'll give their baby the edge over all the others in the mothers group? Well, check out the smart bassinet coming up in just a couple of minutes' time. We have a new medium for budding artists to exercise their artistic flair and share it with the world. And anything is possible, but you'll just have to step into AR to discover it. And tech is borrowing from nature again in an effort to lower electricity consumption in modern computing. But let's not waste any more electricity on this introduction. Let's get this show on the road. Now, here's a headline for you. AI politicians to take a seat in the UK Parliament. Now, in July of 2024, we're not there yet. I'm, of course, assuming that the humanity of all UK elected officials is legit. But, Matt, is this really a possibility in the foreseeable future? AI politicians?
The cynic might say that it'd be nice to see some intelligence in politicians, but I won't go down that path.
Whatever form it comes in?
That's right.
Okay.
Whatever form. I played a little April Fool's Day joke this year, and I like to do a different April Fool's Day thing each year. And I made an announcement that the governments in Australia were going to have, in addition to their normal parliament, their normal council, whatever number of normal politicians or councillors you had on a local government, state government, etc., they're going to add an AI councillor. And this was going to be via a process that you have an election and there's an extra person there or an extra thing there, and they would help the decision making because they take out the emotion and just look at the raw data, the raw facts, and give you the answer.
Absolutely. And the response to that was
absolutely
a mixed
what you
bag.
What you expected to see. It was people going, no, we can't have machines taking over, we can't have machines telling us what to do, etc., etc. So the reaction that you expected until a few people realised that it was the 1st of April. This is not the 1st of April, James. We are not the 1st of April today. We are talking about 3 different spots around the world where AI is seriously being put forward as a politician, as a candidate. Now, there's a few legal issues, a few practical, logistical issues, but you've got 3 different examples I'll give you. You've got AI Steve. He's running for a seat in the UK Parliament. Now, he's made the announcement. He said, I'm running. He or she, let's call it he because it says Steve, said he's running, independent candidate, started to put some policies out there, started to talk about it. Of course, he's not actually registered to stand because that would be a little bit problematic in how you would do that. And in some cases, they're talking about a surrogate. So you've got Steve, the person stands, but Steve, the person says, I'm not here to make any decisions. I'm going to ask AI for all the decisions and I will abide by those decisions. So AI Steve has said,
wow.
I can interact with voters, I can have discussions, I can discuss policy positions. I've got some policies. In fact, the 4-day work week is one of my policies. The incentives for electric car commuters, that's one of my policies. AI Steve can have 10,000 conversations simultaneously. Some people say politicians aren't accessible enough. Well, there you go. You want accessibility, there's 10,000 conversations happening at the same time.
Well, we know that AI can have bias too, can't they?
Well,
and I guess that's a human quality too. So to say, politicians aren't biased, but I wonder do we then start voting on which AI we're happy to go with?
Well, that could be it, but you do know just because AI is taking information from the rest of the world, there are biases there in the rest of the world, and we've talked about this before, where you do get some natural biases. Even if you use an AI tool to go and shortlist your candidates for a job, for example, there'll be some natural bias in there. So that's a possibility. Have those conversations with your AI. Maybe there are competing AIs. Maybe you get to the stage where I've got this particular seat at Parliament and I've got 3 humans and 4 AIs. I wonder which one of those AIs I will choose. So that could be interesting. We've then got in America, in Wyoming, you've got VIC. VIC stands for Virtual Integrated Citizen. It just also happens to be the name of the creator of VIC, called Victor Miller. So Victor is saying that Vic is built on OpenAI's ChatGPT-4, claims an IQ of 155, and I was a bit disappointed about that. That only puts this particular candidate in the top 0.1% of the population. That means there's about 8 million people around the world that have got the same IQ or better. I would have hoped for an AI tool it would have been an IQ off the scale, an IQ higher than any human. So IQ of 155, and that probably beats most of the polys.
We're looking
there
for some supercomputer of the scale in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is that right?
That's what I thought that would be reasonable.
Okay,
Am I being unreasonable there?
Yeah,
So
perhaps.
now again, Vic is saying, look, I'll do the right thing. Victor says, I'll do the right thing. I'll act as a proxy, and presumably I'll also take the wage associated with acting as a proxy. I'll act as a proxy for AI Vic, and I'll just go along and stick to those decisions. And the third one is in the Belarusian parliament, Yaz Gaspodar. So Yaz Gaspodar, pro-democracy platform. And again, some of the policies kind of make sense. They're advocating for education. And that seems reasonable. They're advocating for fair elections. Seems a bit obvious, but apparently that's a big issue. Pushing for the banning of nuclear weapons. That sounds reasonable as well. So I just wonder where we'll go when you start to get some practical challenges, some legal challenges to this, going into the ballot box and looking for AI Steve. But AI Steve had to register. AI Steve needs a date of birth. I know when you fill in forms to be a candidate, it's things like a date of birth. well, date of birth for an AI 2 weeks ago. Well, sorry, you're not 18 years of age. You need to be 18. Then it's things like you can't stand for election unless you're on the electoral roll. Sometimes you need to be on the electoral roll in that particular area. But AI tools presumably aren't on the electoral roll. So there's a few legal impediments. I'm sure they'll be working on those and trying to come up with some sort of processes to get through that. So it sounds interesting. You do have some little examples too that make it even more interesting. New York Mayor is Eric Adams, and he's got a chatbot. So he devised a chatbot just to help answer some questions. And it was just to make things more efficient, take care of some of the basic questions. But there were some questions asked about some business processes, and his chatbot advised business owners to violate local laws. So it was pointed out to him that we've been given advice from your office to do this. Well, no, that's illegal. Well, it was your chatbot at your office that told me to do this, and here's the proof of that.
Yeah.
So it is a bit risky, and
There's a can of worms.
58% of Americans are concerned that AI will spread misinformation in elections. So imagine a misinformation campaign by the candidate themselves. So it sounds very crazy. I don't know where it'll end up. I'm not convinced they'll be able to stand for election, but maybe someone could stand and say, I'll just take my instructions from the master being AI, and maybe people will support them, maybe they won't.
What is that? What is that curse that they used to say? May you live in interesting times? I think we're headed for some very interesting times. Nesting for your first child is quite an experience. There's an enormous list of must-haves that come with a significant expense, and they'll only get you about 6 to 12 months of use. Well, maybe if you have 2 or 3 pups, then you might squeeze another few years out of them. But then, what do you do with all this stuff that has teeth marks and pumpkin stains and a thick layer of sentimental significance? Well, I've got no answers. But folks, if you're about to enter this phase of life, then you just have to get yourself a smart bassinet. Matt, what is the bargain price of a smart bassinet, and why must a modern parent simply have one?
As any true salesperson, James, I'll give you the price at the end after I tell you all the wonderful features. And one of the things that I think is important in looking at having children and just some of the processes you go through, certainly I think when you talk to parents, all of your children, even though they come from the same parents, are different, and what works with one doesn't necessarily work with the other.
That's right, yeah.
And sleep is a commodity that is so well needed during this time frame, and so hard to get sometimes. So just a baby that's crying, and a bit like we've talked about before, that you can get AI to interpret dogs and what they're saying when they're barking. Oh, can we get that happening with babies, please? Because is that cry, I've gone to the toilet in my pants? Is that cry, I'm just trying to annoy you? Is that cry, I want to play?
Yeah.
It's probably the same things as a dog, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So one of the things we used to find ourselves doing sometimes, trying to get our darling children to sleep, was to put them in the car and go for a drive around the block. Back in the days,
I made that error once. Anyway.
Well, back in the days before we had EVs, so you probably weren't being great to the environment, driving around the block, burning up some fuel to try and get your baby to sleep. But it didn't really matter, because then when you got them back home and they're sound asleep, just taking them out of the car seat was enough.
I drove around for an hour once and got to the back, and he was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, having a great time. It's like,
oh, Dad, this is great.
This is ridiculous.
So the SNOO bassinet is designed to automatically, I like that word, automatically soothe babies by mimicking the womb sensation. So presumably babies are pretty comfortable in the womb. Sometimes they don't want to come out. They don't want to come out when they're meant to come out, but they're pretty comfortable in there. So the SNOO uses a 5S approach: swaddle, side stomach, shush, swing, and suck. Now, I'm not sure if that's a comment, the last bit about your baby sometimes, but the idea is this bassinet's got Wi-Fi, it's got microphones, it's got white noise speakers, and a motor to basically rock the baby when it detects them crying. So it listens out for some noise, baby's crying, I'll just rock the baby. Yes, it's working, fantastic. No, it's not. It uses the Wi-Fi, it can communicate, like a baby monitor, communicate with the family sitting out in the lounge room going, oh, everything's lovely. Oh, no, there's some crying coming from in there. Oh, the SNOO has told us it's okay. It'll get our baby back to sleep. We can just sit here and have hands off for a while. It really is trying to take away that whole process of going back and forth and trying to do things. And I like the white noise idea. I like the idea that just a bit of white noise, there might be a bit of noise out in the rest of the household, might be a bit of noise outside the house, but a bit of white noise just to distract the baby, put the baby off. The rocking speed is based on how much the baby's moving around. So it tries to vary the rocking speed to get to the speed that the baby wants to be at. So it's continually monitoring and then changing what it's doing to try and deliver what the baby wants. Now, some experts have said that there's a bit of a concern about either hands-off from the parents, maybe a lack of bonding because the parents aren't there, or maybe a bit of dependency. The recommendation is after about 6 months you should be able to do away with this, but you can imagine a parent saying, oh, this has worked for 6 months, take it out now and put this baby in, and oh no, crying, oh, put it back in the snoo, put it back in the snoo.
Actually, you got this 6-year-old in this smart bassinet.
That's right. I was thinking an adult actually, but just snoo, keep rocking me to sleep, that feels nice. So the idea here is put them in there, help your life as an adult, and that might help you be a better parent.
Can you clean mashed pumpkin stains out of it though?
Well, I'm not sure if you can clean them out of there, but hopefully it's so soothing that you don't get mashed pumpkin stains in the snoo in the first place.
Mashed pumpkin stains get on everything.
They do, that's true. 90% of surveyed nurses believe the snoo reduced infant fussing, and I suppose the proof is in the pudding. Parents are buying them. Parents are using these, all for, get ready for it, the princely sum of $2,000. Now, it sounds like a lot of money, but I know when I was driving around one of our kids one night, if someone said, I'll charge you $10,000 just to put that baby to sleep. Well, here's the money, please. Take our child.
Yeah.
So it sounds quite fascinating, but it is, I think, good use of technology because parents make better decisions when they've had a bit of sleep. If this can help parents get a bit of extra sleep, fantastic.
Mm-hmm. We know that some modern car makers have been looking into self-driving vehicles, and as we know, they're already on the road in some pockets of the world. Well, some clever cookies have decided to come at the problem from a different angle and are developing robotic drivers. Yes, folks, straight out of an 80s comedy sci-fi flick comes the first real robot chauffeur. Matt, this is an interesting development. Has it got legs?
It's got legs, it's got arms, it looks like a humanoid. And I like the idea that they're saying, sure, there's some development going on in autonomous cars, but you've got to build that car from the ground up with all the sensors required, with all the technology built in. And they thought, well, there's a lot of cars out there on the road, and those cars aren't going to be retrofitted, presumably. They're going to be built from the ground up to be autonomous. So let's just build a robot that can drive. The robot's called Musashi. The University of Tokyo has created this robot, and already it can now drive as we sit here and live and breathe. There is a robot in Japan, in Tokyo, driving on private roads at 5 kilometres an hour. That's the limitation at the moment. Now, this is, again, first prototype.
So no good if you're in a hurry.
Well, not really, and no good if you want to be able to walk.
If you want to go any faster than walking pace.
That's right. Most people would walk at 5, maybe even 6 kilometres an hour would be an average sort of walking pace. So probably about walking pace. And this gives you an idea. I've talked about it before. We're actually really clever. Humans can do all sorts of things. We can drive a car. Well, if you're an F1 driver, which I'm not, but I can drive a car at 300 kilometres an hour around a windy street circuit with other cars on the road in my road. So I think the fact that they've got to the point where they've got a humanoid that can get into a car, it's got sensors on hands and feet so that it knows what it's doing, knows how hard it's pushing down on the accelerator or on the brake, for example. It's got, obviously, eyes and it's processing what's happening around the car. But again, they're finding at this stage that to do all of that, it can only go at 5 kilometres an hour. And another minor issue is at this stage, it can only make right-hand turns. so it means you can still get to where you want to go. You just have to make a series of continual right-hand turns to get right back around to where you want to go to. Again, I do say it's just the first prototype, so give it some time. But this is the whole idea, is it would be able to get in a normal car. Now, the time frame. Do we want to get one of these next week? Love one of these next week. But the researchers, and normally researchers talk these things up a bit, the researchers have said, we think that this robot will be able to act as a chauffeur for you within about 50 to 100 years. So they feel like they've got some way to go.
Yeah, right.
And probably the main issue they're finding is the speed of processing. So we think computers are pretty fast, but for it to process, not with all the various sensors that are set up in a driverless car, but for it to process through its eyes, because that's all we've got. We don't have all these radar, LiDAR sensors around us as humans. For it to use just its eyes to look around the car and get to that point where it can look at what's happening, process that, make decisions. That's why it's only 5 kilometres an hour. To get to that stage where it can drive at normal speeds, they're saying that technology is maybe 50 years away minimum.
Well, that says a couple of things. That says that, one, we're an amazing organism, like you suggested, that we're able to develop these tools to do these fantastic jobs and process a lot of information. Humans are pretty wonderful. But the other thing that history shows us that we make these predictions about how long before something's going to happen, and that always comes forward. And I'd be surprised if that didn't come forward, if people pursue this idea of a robot chauffeur.
Well, there's two ways. The Thomas Edisons and Elon Musks of the world make predictions the other way. They always say, we'll have this technology next week, and they know it's never going to be delivered next week, but it hypes things up. But then people being a bit more sensible, like the researchers at the University of Tokyo, I think you're right there. I think 50 years away, they're being a bit conservative in that. Yeah. And if people throw a bit of attention to it, or you get a few different researchers, then it might be 49 years. Who knows?
Well, they were expecting. Nice one. But I remember, when they were predicting reading the human genome, they were expecting that to happen, sort of around 2015, 2020 or something like that. And we'd done it by 2005. So.
Yeah. Look, I do like the idea of the chauffeur too, because I think the idea there, I've got someone to drive my car for me, fantastic. But I've talked about it before, the clothes on my floor, I need someone to pick them up. So if my chauffeur can drive the car, surely I can say,
wonderful.
Come in, James.
Clean my room.
Clean up my room, get rid of those clothes. I didn't put them there. I don't know who put them there, but someone's left them on the floor, and they need to be picked up and sorted and put in the washing machine.
We're one step closer to the Jetsons lifestyle, but it's still a long way. Ticketmaster has suffered a major hammering over the last couple of months, with a major global breach being announced in May. And it includes bank details and credit card numbers, the whole shebang. Matt, I had just bought tickets with these guys in April. I guess that means I've given the global underworld a precious gift that can... I can expect a bill at some stage between now and the indefinite future of a couple of $1 million, I guess.
Probably just running up to the limit of your credit card, which sounds like it's a couple of $1 million. So
well, maybe not that much, but anyway.
So the thing is here, which is quite fascinating, we've heard from some hackers about this. And I'm not planning on it, but if I was going to be a bank robber and I was trying to decide where to rob, I could decide on a bank which might have a bit of money in the vault and maybe a bit of gold tucked away there. Or I could rob Fort Knox, where $265 billion worth of gold is. So why go for the little banks? Why go for the small fry when you can go straight for the heart? And that's exactly what these hackers did. If I'm a Ticketmaster, if I'm anyone that has an online presence, I've got someone in my organisation, probably many people in my organisation, who stay up at night thinking, worrying, trying to make sure that people don't hack the system. That's a huge thing for me. I think Ticketmaster had their systems right, but there's an organisation called Snowflake, who is a cloud storage firm, and they've got Ticketmaster as one of their clients. They've got lots of clients like Ticketmaster. So they've got a banking firm called Santander. They've got Lending Tree. They've got Advance Auto Parts. They've got a number of big players in different categories. So again, if I'm the hacker, I can go and try and attack all these individual organisations, or I can go for the heart. I can go for the cloud storage firm, and I can get access to all that information. And that's exactly what these hackers did. So these hackers are boasting about what they've done. They said, we got into Snowflake, 165 customer accounts. And you think, that's not many. But when one of those is Ticketmaster, when one of those is Santander Bank, then you start to realise, wow, there's a fair bit of information. From the banking firm, they said they got about 30 million customers, about 28 million credit card numbers. So that's not too bad. You could probably go for a small shopping spree on that. You could probably spend $10 of each of those people on their on their credit card. They might notice for a while, and there's $280 million in your back pocket. So it's a fascinating way to do it. Fascinating that they've come out and talked about it. Now, how they actually did it, I don't want to give advice to hackers here, but how they did it was they found a third-party contractor, and I won't mention their name because they're denying they've had any liability in this, but a third-party contractor, they breached one of their employees via a spear phishing attack. So a phishing attack we've talked about before.
There's another type of phishing.
Another type of phishing.
Okay.
So a phishing attack, we know, is when you just send out stuff, you're trying to throw a bunch of lines in the water and try and get a fish to come along and hook onto one of those. So you're basically sending out multiple thousands, hundreds of thousands of emails with someone hoping to get their information compromised. Spear phishing is targeted. So spearfishing is, I want to get into Snowflake. I know they've got some third-party contractors. I'm going to send out phishing attacks, but directed exactly at these particular employees. Unfortunately, one of those employees allegedly gave or basically got tricked by one of those. They then had information from that employee. That then gave them information to Snowflake. They then had information to 165 different accounts.
Wow.
At this stage, you think, well, how are they going to use
So
that?
this big breach comes down to what, one person, do you reckon?
One person, one third-party contractor, and a very sophisticated attack. And what they've done with that information, sure, they've got 20 million credit card numbers from one of those clients alone, but it's a bit clumsy to go around and start charging all those $10, and it's a bit more risk associated with it. So essentially what they've done is gone back to Snowflake and said, all we want is a few $1 million and we'll destroy the data. Now, I just worry about doing business with a hacker. Are you sure you're going to destroy the data?
Yeah.
Oh, Scout's honour, I'll definitely do that for you.
Yeah, honour amongst thieves, huh?
Oh, yeah, that's right. So that's the offer they've been basically working on to say, we'll destroy the data if you do that. Snowflake are obviously looking at their systems, looking whether they should have multi-factor authentication, which they probably should have anyway, talking about what they might do to tie up any of their third-party contractors. But at the moment, that data's out there, and what will happen with it? Who knows?
How long before we go back to paper and filing cabinets?
Well, there's an interesting discussion around that, isn't there? Because some places have gone cashless and some people have reacted violently
Bingo.
to the fact that you've gone cashless because they want to be able to keep that cash under the pillow
Under
and
the mattress,
be able
yeah.
to spend that when they need to. So there are risks. With all the convenience we've got, there are still risks associated with it.
We've been monitoring the great global waste collector, sometimes referred to as the ocean, for some time now. You may well be aware of the 1.6 million kilometre square pool of plastic waste that is just floating on the surface of the Pacific Ocean between California and Hawaii. But that's just the floating stuff, folks. The news doesn't get any better when I tell you that the majority of ocean plastic isn't even on the surface. Matt, tracking the whole problem, including all the subsurface plastic, sounds like a job for a supercomputer.
There's lots of jobs supercomputers could do, couldn't it? Just give me the lotto numbers for next week. Surely a supercomputer could do that.
Surely.
But supercomputer-powered search algorithms to track ocean plastic pollution. Finally, a good use for a supercomputer. Fantastic. Now, you're quite right. A lot of that ocean plastic is slightly submerged. Not very deep. It's there still. And eventually it does wash up on the shore still, or it might stay out in the ocean for a long time. And
Or it might get swallowed up by a turtle.
exactly right, could do damage to various marine life. So the fact that it's submerged makes it quite hard to see, and typically you might be using things like satellites to look at this. Well, over the last 6 years, they've been doing some work with Copernicus Sentinel-2 satellite, that's the European Space Agency's Copernicus, and using, or they've gathered so far, 300,000 multispectral and infrared images. So the idea here is don't just take photos with the visible you can see, but the multispectral, the infrared, looking for different anomalies in the ocean to see, hold on, there's something there that isn't quite the same as that bit over there. There's some plastic underneath there. And then apparently what you get are windrows. And I thought a bit like when you're cutting lucerne, you kind of put it in rows for your lucerne to then get picked up. So the same type of thing, you get these windrows, which are filaments of garbage formed by basically currents, marine currents and wind. And so you get these little rows. Now, you get them sometimes a kilometre long, but they can be up to, say, 23 kilometres long.
Yeah,
if you can capture them while they're in the ocean, they're a bit easier to capture. But as we've found out, the ocean's pretty big. So just going and sending a ship out there randomly to go around and scoop it up, you're going to be there for a long time. By using this, you can actually detect exactly where it is. So they've now started, with all this data they've gathered, they've now started going out there and monitoring it. And now there's a new measure, a new SI for, or SI system, SI unit, sorry.
Yeah, SI unit, yeah.
SI unit for area. Apparently, I would think of square kilometres, but they've got this area
Football
with
field.
windrows, football field, soccer field. Yeah, this
Sorry,
is the new one.
I
So,
thought the joke. Yeah, right.
so
Yeah,
apparently, in some of the data I've read on this, they've got an area that's about 94.5 square kilometres or 7,500 soccer fields. Why do we do it, James? Why do we do it?
7,500 soccer fields.
That's right.
Is that easier to imagine than the original figure that you gave us?
See, 94.5 square kilometres, to me, when I hear about square kilometres, I go, okay, what's the approximate square root of 94? Let's go to 100, 10. Yeah. So I think of a square 10 kilometres by 10 kilometres and I go, oh, yeah, wow, that's a pretty big area. Yeah. If I stand here and drive for 10 kilometres and then go at right angles and drive for 10 kilometres, gee, there's a big chunk in there. And if that's all full of junk, wow, that's a big area. 7,500 soccer fields. I'm struggling to imagine 7,500 soccer fields. I can imagine in an area that I can familiarise myself with soccer fields with maybe 10.
Yeah, 10 soccer fields is probably the limit of soccer field SI units.
So you're probably right. You need some recommendations around that. And I think the idea of when they say this many gigalitres or how many swimming pools, I think the idea is to reduce it to a smaller number because their brain can comprehend a smaller number. So they need something that's bigger than a soccer field to do...
Someone who came up with that stat wasn't thinking about that, though.
No, that's right. It was probably okay when it was 2 square kilometres, but when you get to 94.5, you need another bigger thing to go and then compare it to maybe...
I don't know, maybe we've got to start talking in loosened paddocks or something like that.
Maybe I was thinking of that. I was thinking of AFL fields might be a bit bigger than soccer fields, but they're circular. That makes it a bit harder to... Well, not quite circular, but oval, so that makes it a bit harder. So moving along, the idea here is that you can actually start to look for these and then send ships out to pick them up because they do tend to end up mostly getting back onto shore and then you get all the rubbish that gets on shore and it doesn't end up on shore in one dump when you just go and pick it all up. Out in the ocean is actually relatively easy to pick up if you know where it is and you can actually go and pick it up in one go. The other thing that I found interesting with this is that you can use it for other things. So, for example, sometimes containers fall off ships. They're pretty hard to find out in the ocean, and often they do float. They're often a sealed container, so often they do float, but where? And so let's go looking. We've just gone from here to here, 5,000 kilometres. Somewhere along that path is that container. So they say with this same technology, you can look for shipping containers, you're looking for oil spills, search and rescue missions. I started thinking of MH370. Maybe they can find MH370, although it's probably not just below the surface. It's probably a long way below the surface. If, in fact, James... maybe we've got it wrong with MH370. Maybe it's not in the ocean. We've spent a long time, and I read a story just the other day where they're now saying they can use underwater microphones that were recording information from 1,000 kilometres away 10 years ago when MH370 went down in an ocean somewhere. But maybe we've got it all wrong. Maybe we're looking in oceans. Maybe it's not in an ocean. Maybe it's on land somewhere. Maybe those people are still living somewhere.
Maybe it went up. Maybe it's out in space.
Maybe it went into orbit. Yeah. Anyway, this is quite fascinating. What a great use of information from satellites and just we've got information from satellites, but using them in different ways, different technologies adding on, because let's take advantage of all that imagery up there rather than just focusing on what my next door neighbour's doing, which is apparently what satellites are used for.
Do you have much experience in the virtual or augmented reality space? It's one thing to move around in virtual reality, to see landscapes and objects, and even interact with avatars. But it's another thing to create something that is tangible in VR or AR. But it's the sort of place where art can exist in a very real way. And so Logitech have created a stylus specifically for creating art in virtual and augmented reality, which I guess, Matt, means that it can only be viewed and shared in a very, very unique way.
Well, I think you would actually get to the point where you could share it in a physical way because you could use a 3D printer to print something, for example.
Oh, yeah, perhaps. Yeah, okay.
You could actually take it. So I started to look at this and I thought, what's the real use of this? How am I going to use this stylus, which effectively is a stylus that's got the ability for 3D? And I thought about an Apple Pencil. Most people are familiar with an Apple Pencil. You've got an iPad. You pull out your Apple Pencil, you can make some notes on screen in the document you're working with, or you can do some drawings. I know my son does his drawings now. Actually, we bought him a long time ago. We bought him a tablet to do some of his drawings, and it was a bit strange drawing on a tablet and watching on screen.
Yeah.
You've almost got to train yourself to go, I'm down there going in a horizontal plane, and what I'm producing is something on a vertical plane.
Yeah.
And so anyway, you get the hang of that, and that's fine, but he found it much easier to start drawing directly on the screen, for example, on an iPad. But this is taking an Apple Pencil, removing the 2D part of that, being an iPad, and going into a 3D world. So you put on a headset, you put on a MetaQuest VR headset, and then you can combine imagery, so you can do it with AR or just have imagery on screen in your VR world and then actually draw something that would be 3D. So you could literally go and create a 3D object and then say, I want to print that object now. Or you could take, for example, something that already exists. And I saw people, for example, doing designs on shoes. Take the shoe and go and do some design. You know, when people do those groovy designs on a standard running shoe, do that in that 3D environment with your headset on, you draw all around it, and then once you think it's right, turn it around. No, I think I'll change it a bit more, so you can get that design just right before you then go and say, I'm now going to go and apply that to a real shoe, for example. So a whole range of things you can create in this virtual world. I don't know whether most people will just use it as a stylus, as in the same as they might use an Apple Pencil. I'm just intrigued by how many times people will actually say, I want to be able to use that in a complete 3D environment. It does look quite strange because I watch videos of people with headsets on just drawing in thin air and shading and colouring things in and doing things, watching what they were seeing on their
But it makes you
headset.
inquisitive. You want to be able to see what they're doing.
Well, and again, that's where you have a little device plugged into your headset, so another screen can be watched while people are actually doing these sorts of things. And sometimes there's a bit of garbage that people would create, but the same, I can't draw very well, the same as if I try to do it, I'd get up with a bit of garbage. It doesn't suddenly make me a good artist, but for people that want to draw in that environment, again, I think they'll probably be used in a 2D environment, but you've got that ability to go in a 3D environment, which looks very strange. But basically, it's an Apple-priced stylus, Apple equivalent stylus, if you like, but being able to be used with other products, not just Apple products, and a whole range of different programs, depending on what you might use. For example, if you're using Adobe Substance Modeler or Gravity Sketch or Painting VR, so a whole range of different programs, not just something that might be able to be used on an Apple iPad. So,
well, my headspace went straight to, okay, so if you can create art in augmented reality, then you can create an entire art gallery. And people can go for a wander through this art gallery from the comfort of their own lounge chair rather than having, or say the comfort of their own lounge chair, but your living room, shall we say, rather than having to travel across the world. Now, some people say, but you've got to travel to get the full experience. Anyway, I was thinking that's where my headspace went. And there was an amazing artwork, I think it was by a Japanese artist, that created something that essentially modelled a lattice that you would expect to see in, say, a metal. So being able to see the atoms in the metal and how they're nice and perfectly spaced apart. And that's, okay, from a scientist's point of view, that's not perfect in itself. But these marbles were hanging from the ceiling in a space that was enormous, like I don't know how many football fields or swimming pools, but it was an enormous space. And so there was a lot of perfectly placed marbles hanging from the ceiling to the floor to give this idea of what it would be like to wander through a metal to see the lattice of atoms there. Yeah.
And so take that creation in a virtual world.
In a virtual world, and you can just
that.
put that together.
That's right.
And boom, and you can go for a wander for it. You can even go and touch it.
And the other part is that it would be much cheaper for them to construct those marbles hanging from the ceiling in that perfect way. It would be expensive. It would be a very time-consuming process to create it in a virtual world. I think it would be much cheaper to create. B, more accessible, because not everyone can go and visit that particular exhibit.
Bingo.
And you can't recreate it easily, but on a VR world. So there's a whole range of uses.
Charge admittance.
Well, why not?
Artists got
no reason you couldn't. Yeah, there's no reason you couldn't do that. You pay to go and if I got to pay to watch my cricket, then surely you can pay to go and look at an artwork. So it does sound quite interesting, and I never know all the different ways things are going to be used. You think, I can see how that's going to be used, and you blink, and someone's using it in an entirely different way based on their experience, background, knowledge, and what they're trying to achieve, and suddenly you go, wow, that's a great use of that technology. So who knows what can happen from all of this. It's not available yet, but it's not that far away. Most of the things we talk about are years or decades or 50 years away in the case of the humanoid driver, but this one comes out in a couple months' time. You'll be able to buy this in a couple months' time.
And there should be a whole lot of creative minds right behind it,
I think there'll be a lot of creative minds into it.
Traditional computing is creating an enormous drain on current electricity supply, and it won't be a surprise that the electricity budget for modern computing is set to increase very rapidly. But hopefully, a revolution in chip design may minimise all of this and decrease electricity consumption in computing. Matt, it's called Neuromorphic computing, and it's one of these other modern designs that have been stolen from nature. How does it work?
Stolen from us, James.
Yeah.
I want some payment for this copyright stealing of my brain. I'm not sure they use my brain
That's
in particular.
a big claim there, Matt.
It is, isn't it? So get some good lawyers onto that. You're right about data usage, though, energy usage through all the data we've got at the moment with data centers, AI, cryptocurrency. I still can't believe we're spending so much energy on cryptocurrency. But with all of these different computing needs, the consumption of power is expected to double from where it was in 2022 to where it will be in 2026. And to make it scarier for you, another external measurement here, by 2026, the consumption from AI, cryptocurrency and data centers will match Japan's annual energy usage. So there's an SI unit for you. Japan energy usage is now a measure.
It's now an SI unit, right.
That's right. And going further, at the moment, data centers consume about 1% of global electricity. By 2030, they're expected to consume 4% of all our electricity needs. That's because computers aren't necessarily that efficient. They're getting better all the time, but they're not necessarily that efficient. And they're typically running all the time and doing things all the time. And we want that ability to ramp up when those tickets go on sale for Cold Chisel. We want to be able to have the ability to have lots of people connecting at the same time, but 2 hours later, we don't need as many people. So you need to have all that computer powering at the ready to go.
Well, they're also working very hard, and laptops get very hot when they're sitting on your lap, right?
Yeah, that's right. And then you need some cooling, so that takes more power to do that.
Yeah.
Neuromorphic is basically looking at what the human brain does and says, how can we replicate that in a physical device that we can build? Now, it's tricky because we still don't really fully understand the human brain. We understand we've got about 86 billion neurons. We understand that they get connections or communication through the synapses. But memory is one thing that still is a bit of a mystery. How do we actually remember something? Where's the 1 and the 0 that's reconfigured like on a hard drive to remember something on a computer? We don't really have that in our brain. And the elasticity of our brain still, even as we get older, obviously much better when we're younger, but as we get older, we can still learn new things. So we've still got some elasticity, maybe less, but we've still got some in our brain to actually create new connections and learn new things and remember new things. And even our memory, we might have short-term memory, remember what happened 5 minutes ago, but long-term memory, you can remember some incident from when you were a kid. You can remember something from decades ago. So quite incredible. How do you replicate all that in a computer? Well, that's exactly what they're working on now. You've got some big companies. You've got Intel, you've got IBM working on that. There's been a lot of research done trying to do this, probably going back to the 1980s, but they think they're getting closer now. One of the main drivers, though, of course, is energy efficiency. Our brain's pretty efficient. Our brain's pretty good at conserving energy, ramping down and up as we need it. We go to sleep, for example, not much brain power going on then. Even just doing simple things around the house, maybe watching a game of footy, not a lot of brain power being used there. But then suddenly we've got to think about driving, lots of brain power going on with all the questions and answers we need to have there. So it's not only about energy efficiency, but also about speeding it up. And one of the things they're doing with this is typically you've got processing units or CPUs and you've got memory on different chips on different parts of the circuit board. But combining them onto one chip makes it more efficient, but also just requires some slight tweaking in the way the programming occurs for that processing to occur at that chip. So that makes it more energy efficient, also makes it faster. I think we're going to need some of these things for things like autonomous vehicles, our robots, even just some of the wearables we're getting. We need them to be smaller, we need them to be faster. And certainly, I find it a bit of a pain. I've got to charge my watch up every 2 days. Why can't I have it go for a week? Well, maybe with neuromorphic computing, you could have it go for a week or even longer.
So this stands to be a real revolution.
Yeah, it does. Now, one of the things I find fascinating here is that you've got a range of things happening. You've got, for example, neuromorphic. You've got some conventional computing, if you like, but you've also got this little quantum computing. And quantum computing still is out there with people trying to resolve practical uses of quantum computing. I think the experts understand the theory behind quantum, but to actually turn it into a practical, useful computer, but that can be incredibly efficient as well in terms of what it can do because of the incredible power. So it can do so much more with the computing power available to it. I can't give you any answers to when we'll see an integrated conventional neuromorphic quantum computer, but if we can get that, then we'll see some great energy efficiency, but also just some incredible power that we'll be able to use for a whole range of things like picking the lotto numbers. definitely.
Neuromorphic quantum computing.
There you go. You heard it here first, folks.
It seems that you're either leaning into AI these days or you're falling behind the competition. Well, Dan Murphy's liquor stores have got AI scanning the retailers to ensure that they're true to their promise of cheaper bottles by updating prices in real time. Matt, this is probably a good time to point out that we're not a sponsored podcast.
No, we're not. But the interesting thing here, and I will quote Dan Murphy from 1995, he said, and sorry, for people around the world, Dan Murphy is a liquor outlet. There's about 273 Dan Murphy stores across the nation. So Dan Murphy, 1995, said, I beat all my competitors every month, every week, every day, every hour, on every price, on every product, on every bottle. So he seemed to have his business model based on being the cheapest, which is a bit dangerous. But if you want to be true to that, you need to make sure you're true to that. You can't have someone walking in saying, what, $20? I can buy it down the road for $19.50. So Dan Murphy has said, let's use some AI. So they go and use internet scraping technology to constantly monitor the internet to see any of their competitors, what prices they've got, constantly compare it to the prices they've got, and update the prices if necessary. They've gone a step further than that. When you walk into a Dan Murphy's and you think there's a bottle, there's the ticket price on there for $20, and Dan Murphy says, no, we've heard about another price for $19.50. That price is $19.50. Well, I didn't know that. It says $20. So they've now gone to electronic shelf labelling. So there's no human required to update that shelf price. Once they decide there's a newer price, a couple of minutes later, all 273 stores across the nation have got the updated shelf price for the cheapest price. So again, now you don't have to worry about that. You just come in, that price on the shelf, you know it's the cheapest, and away you go. You pick up your bottle of wine or your beers or whatever it might be, and away you go, confident that you've got the cheapest price in the entire nation. But I'm really interested. I want to go and start a liquor retailer now. And I want my whole promise to the world to be, we're going to have the cheapest liquor. And we've got a paradox. Dan Murphy's and Tech Talk's liquor cannot both be the cheapest.
You run Dan Murphy's into the ground by continually lowering your prices. You've got to be altruistic here, though.
Well, I'm thinking of free alcohol for everyone.
50 cents for a bottle of vodka?
Well, and this is it. If you had another company that did the same thing and they've employed the same tools, so they say, we're going to scrape the internet and get the cheap. Oh, Dan Murphy's at $19.50 for that bottle of wine. We'll be $19.49. Now, we've just talked about neuromorphic quantum computing. At the speed of AI, as soon as I put my price down,
on the shelf, go and grab yourself a bottle of Cab Sav.
Yep.
And you're just watching the price go down and down. Oh,
just wait.
I'll wait here. Just see what happens.
Now, surely in this process, they would have to have a floor. They'd have to have a bottom price they could go to. So be the cheapest, but you can't go below $18 for that bottle of wine. But if I go to $18 and I've got the promise of the cheapest and you're at $18, well, we can't both be the cheapest. So, look, if I go 1 cent below it, then I can still claim to be the cheapest. But I go 1 cent below. So where does it end? At the moment, they've got a monopoly on claiming the cheapest.
Yeah.
So they're probably okay. So they can run this tool, if you like, and that's fine. But another competitor out there, what happens?
It's going to be awesome.
The dream, that's right, the dream is free alcohol.
You get people just going down to Dan Murphy's just to watch the prices dropping down. They're not going to make any purchases. Just want to see what's happening here.
But surely it would be so fast we wouldn't even see the price go down. As soon as that other competitor opens its doors, it's just done. Everything's zero. So I can see the
mayhem. You can see mayhem.
I can see mayhem. I can see the logic of what they're doing. I can see the power of what they're doing, but I can also see the potential pitfalls of what they're doing. So,
of Dan Murphy changing its business model.
That's right. Yes. We are. Maybe they'll need to change it to be. We are at least the equivalent of the cheapest. Doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? So then they could both be at $18 and then they both stop or whatever it might be.
Fair enough.
Yeah, but anyway, I like the idea of the technology. They say save 12 hours in staff time each week, which might be bad for staff, you might think, but it's probably a pretty laborious job changing the shelf labels. So by going to electronic shelf labeling, 12 hours a week, but more importantly, 10 million sheets of paper a year are saved by changing over to electronic shelf labelling.
Yeah, right.
Because if you're continually updating your price to be the cheapest, you can only print out new sheets, go and stick those up across 273 stores. It makes sense. In fact, why haven't they done it before? Why have they taken this long to get around to this?
Now, here's some nostalgia for boomers and Gen Xers alike. Remember those screensavers in the 90s? Do you remember why we even had them? They just came in as parcel of your desktop, but they were mesmerising. Matt, did you ever find yourself just staring blankly across at those 3D tubes filling somebody's screen during your lunch break?
Flying toasters was my favourite.
Flying toasters. Yeah.
Why not? Why not put some wings on a toaster?
Tell you what, those tubes though, they come out and they fill the screen with these tubes just drawing all over the screen, and you could watch that for ages.
You could, and that was actually, so it is a bit of a nostalgia look, this particular topic, but that was actually to show off Windows NT, new technology. So I love when someone calls something new, whatever.
Yeah.
So Windows NT came out back in about 1994. NT 3.5 came out. And so that was saying new technology. But how long can you say something's new technology for? We look at it now and go, NT, what? Milliseconds, that's right. What a joke. That couldn't do this or it couldn't handle that. But NT was new technology in 1984, but it had a thing called OpenGL. And they had a little competition at Microsoft and said, we want a screensaver that shows off OpenGL because we want to show how good OpenGL is. And so some people in Microsoft submitted some screensavers, and then the marketing team went, well, they're also good, we'll run with all of them. And Pipes was one of those. So it was showing off how you could render a 3D type image and make it look realistic on screen. So that was where OpenGL was all about. But if you go back a bit, screensavers were introduced for a practical reason before we wanted to see cool flying toasters. And that was obviously back in the old days of CRT screens, cathode ray telescope screens, where you actually had electron guns firing electrons at the screen, which was coated with a
phosphorescent paint. Yeah,
phosphorus screen. So, and you could see times when if you left something on the screen for a while, and it didn't seem to take that long, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and you'd go to different screens, and every screen you went to, in particular a white screen, so a word processor, for example, you'd see this faint image of something that was on the screen. It might have been a logo for something, it might have been something, what's that there? And oh, hold on, and it's just a permanent part of the screen because the electrons continually firing there.
At that phosphorescent screen, so it just became excited that it just hung around in that particular state.
It burned away, I think, some of the actual phosphorus on that screen.
Yeah, right.
So the screensaver was introduced, and the first screensaver was just a black screen. And you went, well, it's not that exciting, is it? So then you'd come back to your computer and go, I've got a black screen, and you touch something, it's back alive again. But then that's when they came up with the idea of flying toasters, various patterns.
But we had, those patterns that were just a series of lines and it make some sort of quadrilateral shape or whatever.
Yeah,
and they would just bounce around. You'd watch the corners bounce around and just redesign this shape. And at the time, I was thinking, wow, that's amazing.
That's right, exactly. And all it was just to make sure that there was something moving on screen, not the same image continually being burned on. So wear out the screen evenly rather than have one part of the screen wear out.
And blank screens were just too boring.
Too boring, that's exactly right. The last operating system from Windows, at least, that had screensavers built in was Windows XP Service Pack 3, released in 2009. We've now got much better options where, well, for a start, most people don't have a CRT screen, so the burn-in isn't the issue. You've now got LCD or LED screens. But the other part is that now we're talking about power saving. So you just have your screen power down, your whole computer might power down, so you don't need to continue to be running. And probably there's not a lot of time. Back in the days of CRT screens and older computers, you probably weren't on the computer a lot. You probably might be on the computer for a little bit and then doing something else and then come back and
to turn it off, that was
you wouldn't turn it off and wait for it to power down and power up, and so now powering down is probably the more common way that people do it. But it's interesting to see just that all those things that happen with that. If you haven't had a screensaver, then you can go and find browsers that replicate screensavers, so you can actually have that experience without having the screensaver experience.
For those people who really love their screensavers, 1, get a life. 2, you can get those screensavers on a browser.
But some of these are fan recreations, so there are fan recreations of 3D pipes. And
so if you're a fan of screensavers, that's an indication you've got to get out more.
That's right. That's possibly right.
And that's all we have for you, folks. The foghorn has sounded and this ship is sailing. I'm on virtual iceberg watch and we are out of here. Thanks for another cracking tech talk, Matt.
I am thinking seriously about this liquor store, I just do like the idea of tech talk, cheapest liquor in town, and just seeing what we can do. See if we can play with the algorithm. Even you don't need to do much. You just need to set up a site that just advertises liquor for sale and just advertise it at cheap prices and just see what Dan Murphy's does.
What do you have to do when someone actually approaches you to buy a bottle? You say, we're out of stock.
Out of stock, that's it. I like it. The ACCC might have a problem with that.
Well, I'm off to check all my credit card statements again and see if I can find any purchase for any Lamborghinis or $2,000 smart bassinets. And while I'm on the subject, here's a big cheerio to the folks in all the cybersecurity departments of all the organisations that have insisted on accessing my personal details over the past years. May you be well fed and rested and ever vigilant in preventing my doppelgangers from sprouting up all over the world and costing me millions of dollars. Thanks again for tuning in. Once again, folks, Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson is brought to you each week by a small team of dedicated and clever humans, but delicately packed in decorative boxes by Oompa Loompas. I'm James Eddy, wishing you all a happy and productive week, and we'll be back in another 7 days with another grab bag of stories to give you a head start into the future and the brave new world that awaits us all. Bring along a friend for the ride, folks. Until next time, take care and we'll see you then.